Oh, tiptoe through the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me. Oh, tiptoe from the garden, by the garden, on the willow tree. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks we'll take a randomly selected movie and we'll review it ourselves. I'm Brian Morgan and with me is
Dan Bergman.
And on this episode, for a brief stint, we will have a special guest or two that I recorded a segment of the podcast earlier with. Dan's already listened to it, so he kind of knows what's going to be said, and we'll get his impressions on their impressions. This week we are covering the horror movie Insidious.
Oh, yes.
Because Dan owns it.
Because I own it, and it's so appropriate. I was glad that this hit the random, because it's Halloween season. I know people are saying it's only September. Hey, every day is Halloween to me.
Well, it's getting closer to October.
Close enough. November 1st is close enough for me, but,
You mean like November 1st after Halloween?
Oh, yeah.
Getting ready for next year?
Yeah.
Nice.
364 days left,
Well, some people feel that way about Christmas, so...
Hey, more power to them.
Well, I will ask the question that we always ask. Dan, how did this movie get on your shelf?
We saw it. It was one of those movies where I like scary movies. I think we established that in the last episode and everything. So
Yes, we did.
the thing I didn't mention, it's like, with horror movies, like any other genre, or just with movies in general, you take the good with the bad. You really got to weed through them to find the ones that really stand out. So when I saw this one, no idea what was it about. They just said, "Hey, it's a ghost story. Check it out." Okay, and I did, and I instantly fell in love with it. I love a good ghost story. It's kind of a hobby of mine. I read paranormal articles. I subscribe to a number of paranormal pages on Facebook. I like to consider myself a man of science and reason, and they even had a group of scientists at CERN say that quantum physics proves that ghosts cannot exist, which was like, aw, but okay.
Bummer.
If they're saying so, I have reason, to listen to what they have to say, and their explanation, to a layman at least, what I understood from it was making sense. So it's kind of a disappointment, but like I said, during the day, in the light, I'm a man of reason and science, and I say, yeah, ghosts aren't real. But at night, home alone in the dark, much more open mind.
Ain't that the truth?
And, this movie really catered to that. I like that it had a little bit of a twist to it. I really like the use that they had of astral projection and the explanation of the other side being called the further.
We're getting into the movie, but that's okay. The further was not the astral projection. The further was further out than that. It was the longer you're out there, the closer you get to the further. So.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like I like their use of astral projection being the leaving of your body and everything, and the further being one of those places that you can go.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, when you die, you go there. If you astral project, that's one of your possible destinations. I enjoyed the use of those lores to make this movie happen the way it did.
Yeah, they did reach into the traditional, this is where the tormented dead go, that sort of thing. And demons, I guess. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, and then it's like the imagery. I don't know if I can say it's anything original, but it definitely was appealing to me as far as wanting to get that spooky feeling in that atmosphere. So this basically became a movie that I felt that I could watch over and over again and still be scared. Not surprised, but feel that creepy feeling and watch it with friends, again, come Halloween, it's like, let's watch Insidious and get that feeling, around the campfire type feeling,
Okay. Well, I don't own this movie. As we discussed earlier on our last podcast, I am not a tremendous fan of horror movies. There are some, like Alien, that I do care for, but I like the sci-fi elements of it as opposed to just the horror. So I rented this, and as I discussed earlier, my daughter had some friends over for her 15th birthday party. And I thought, well, what better thing to do with teenage girls in the house than watch a scary movie? And so we sat down and watched it during the daytime. That was one of their conditions. And that's my history with the movie. I knew of its existence. I'd seen the trailers when they were on television, but I really didn't have any idea what the movie was about except for what I'd read on IMDb, which was comatose kid and possession. So that was kind of about all I knew about it. So I really was fresh going in, and yeah, there were a couple of spots that scared me.
Yeah, you got the best of the experience, when you first see a movie, because it's all new. When it comes to movies like this, every scene is a possible source of fear / fright.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, watching this again to prepare for this podcast, I really started to appreciate the filmmaking in this as well. Because in the opening, the real setup is that, you show the very dark room and the child sleeping in the bed, and you see the shadow of the woman in the window.
Yeah.
And walks away, and then, the movie pans off. I'm not going to go into too much detail what happens next. But after that, when, you have the calm before the storm, so to say, that's my personal classification on the beginning of horror movies, is you have the calm before the storm, the character establishment, the setup, the way to make you feel sorry for these people when the stuff hits the fan.
Yeah, the act of getting you concerned for the characters in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So I was starting to notice that almost every scene of the beginning had something either in the foreground, but mostly in the background. Like there was a window over somebody's shoulder or the doorway behind them that the camera always seemed to frame just right so you could see it and it was in focus.
I was going to say there was some really good framing going on in this.
Yeah, and so your attention, it was almost like the magician's misdirect almost, because it's like, okay, I'm watching the characters because they're the ones talking, but something's got to happen, and for the most part, nothing happens. Nothing walks across the window, the doors don't close by themselves, but it's setting you up, it's like you're watching, you're waiting, that anticipation.
That was one of the things that I found myself doing on this initial watch. I can't even call it a rewatch. As I was watching the movies, I was trying to pay attention to the things that were in the background to see if there were clues as to what was going on, as well as things that might show consistency throughout the movie. And I just want to point out one of the things that I noticed initially was Dalton, the little boy that is in the coma. When we first meet him and he's in his room, he's got some crayon drawings on the wall. Mm-hmm. And I think we're to the part now where we can start talking about the movie a little bit. So in the movie, they move again, and those crayon drawings are back up on the wall, and it becomes a large plot element. But it was one of those things that I thought they did very well in the moment, was not lingering on them for too long to say, pay attention, these will come back later. It was just a thing that was in the background, and they kind of called your attention to it, but it wasn't one of those exceptionally long, drawn-out pauses like, look, there's a letter.
Yeah, it was the right amount of subtlety that for you, like you said, for you to notice, but kind of dismiss once it was gone. It's like, that's nothing. Okay, but then later it's like, oh, wait, that was something.
Right, so I thought they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, again, it's like the subtlety in the beginnings, really, to me, a good ghost story movie has a lot of that. The subtle clues and having you anticipate. And so, like I said, there's a lot of that. And again, even in this rewatch, one of these things where I've totally lost count of how many times I've seen this movie. But I still find myself looking for something. Because, it's like when you watch a movie again and you're thinking, did I miss something? I'm going to look for more details and everything. And
Sure.
so I'm still watching those windows. I'm still watching the doors, waiting for something to move and everything. And I just, okay, nothing moves yet. They're not experiencing the hauntedness yet. So.
And I did like the way they eased into it, although I will say, and I think when we actually play the recording of what the girls thought, I'm going to agree with one of the girls The movie started out very slow, and it took a long time to get going. There was a lot of sort of slow world building that I think could have been shortened just a little bit if they'd introduced a little more of the ghost interaction, like when, I forget the mother's name, when the mother puts her books on the bookshelf and then she comes back and they're knocked down. That was poltergeist stuff. And that was one of the movies that this made me think of, and how that sort of started, where things just started happening around the house, and then it just sort of built up to a bigger thing. But I think Poltergeist maybe went a little bit quicker.
Yeah, Poltergeist, I mean, not to start talking about another movie, but, to just bring into context what you're saying, Poltergeist, I think within the first scene was already starting, because Carol, it starts out with the national anthem playing at the end of the broadcast day, which kids these days probably don't know what that is.
Don't even understand that, yeah.
But there was a time when TV stations closed up for the night. That happened. They weren't 24 hours.
This concludes the end of our broadcast day.
And at the end of the night, a lot of them would play the national anthem and go off the air. So that's how Poltergeist starts. And once the TV goes off the air and TV goes to static, Caroline comes in, starts talking to TV, and everyone's like, "What's she doing?"
Mm-hmm.
Right off the bat, first scene. Not even 5 minutes into it. This movie, not quite so much. I mean, you have that first opening moment. Like I said, you saw the woman in the window, the shadow of the woman, I should say, and then later you kind of saw her figure in the dark, and then the opening credits. Which, to kind of jump subject here a little bit, the opening credits I like, as it goes through different scenes throughout the house, and it showed little bits of haunting, the chair moving on its own, the picture frame moving. That was pretty cool.
I was just going to start talking about that as well. It was a great bit of, I don't want to say foreshadowing, but it kind of, when you started thinking back to oh, that was in the credits. Oh, that was in the opening credits. Oh, that was in the opening credits. Oh, that's who that was. That part was kind of neat from, again, a filmmaking standpoint.
Yes. Once the movie started, then all the spookiness kind of dipped down. And I think the filmmakers understood that, like I said, the character building, the establishment and everything, trying to make you feel sympathetic to these characters, might have been that long, boring part. And I think, maybe that's why they did the framing as they did, to keep us wondering, to keep us looking in the background, waiting for it. So when finally something does happen, it's real subtle. The books fall on the floor. We know what it was, but, they don't know what it is. It's like, hey, I didn't touch your books. Yeah, and I understand why somebody who isn't into movies, not just horror movies, but movies in general, who don't really think of the mechanics, might view this as, wow, that was really boring. This is taking too long. I get it.
Well, I mean, I'm into movies and the movie mechanics, and I thought it took a bit long. I did like what you said, the framing and how they sort of, is something going to happen? Is something not going to happen? And kind of kept you in suspense until things actually did start happening. The more you start paying attention to movies and seeing the plot mechanics, and you start noticing things, not that some of the things weren't painfully obvious, but when Renee, that's the mother's name, I looked it up while we were chatting.
Yeah.
When she goes up to the attic and she's trying to turn on the light, and there's that is something going to happen moment, and you're sitting there figuratively on the edge of your seat, like, what's going to happen up here? She heard a noise, she knew there was something going on, and she gets up there and she breaks that step on the ladder, and then obviously when she wiggles it, oh, this is coming into play later, this is going to be a thing. Because when I read the description on IMDb, I had thought that we were just going to open up and the kid was going to be in a coma, and it was just going to be a battle for possession or something like that. I didn't realize it was going to be him going into a coma at the end of, I think, if I'm dividing the movie up properly, at the end of the first act.
Though, if, in defense of the way the movie was made, like you said, it took until the end of the first act and everything, but, that whole establishing thing and them starting to suspect that something's going on in the house, and when she's up in the attic, when the Renee is up in the attic and she sees that broken ladder part, and she kind of ignores it, and it's one of those things where it's like, is this something? Oh, I guess it's nothing. But then when Dalton goes up, slips and falls, and that's that magician's misdirect. Oh, he's in a coma because of that fall. But no, it's not because of the fall, because they can't find anything wrong with him. And there's that twist, and there's that wait, what's going on? It was not just the fall, but that's what the misdirect was. The fall was the, it's just because of the head injury, but it's not. It's defending the filmmaking, I guess. It's just what I'm doing.
Well, here's what I think about and I'm trying to remember now, and I just watched the movie earlier today, so correct me if I'm wrong. When his family came upstairs, wasn't he already unconscious when they got up there?
No,
he never moved again after they saw him.
No. When they went up in the attic after he fell, they were very concerned, and the mother was acting hysterically. Mm-hmm. And she was saying, "No, come up here. It's very dangerous, off limits." And the father was like, "Where does it hurt?"
Okay, yeah, you're right.
And they put him into bed. They showed his bruise. And then the next morning when he went to work, he lifted the hair up his forehead, saw a big bruise and everything, kissed him goodbye.
Yeah, like you do.
And then later on, that's when they find him unconscious, and that's when the whole coma thing starts.
Okay.
And then after that, the 3 months later, and you see that he's still in the coma. He's got a home nurse. They had left the home because she thought it was haunted. And then later comes the other twist that I like, is that, it's not the house that was haunted, it was the boy.
Well, that was one of the things that, again, and I wanted to make sure that we talked about it, was the breaking of the standard horror movie trope, like we talked about last episode rather, with Poltergeist and the Amityville Horror. They stick around in the house. They didn't stick around in the house in this movie. They moved to a new house.
Yes.
And, it was like, oh, well, they did the smart thing. Good for them. I applaud your your bravery or whatnot.
The husband actually listened to the wife. It's like, I can't be here. That's right. All right, we're out of here. It's like, hey.
Okay, well, we'll go. Yeah.
We'll go. Unfortunately for them, if that was the reason why that everything was going on, then we wouldn't have much of a movie after that. But no, it wasn't the house. It was the boy. So I should have said, what?
No, go ahead. I
was going to say, it was the boy. So it's like, hey, you know what? He's young. We can make another one. Let's just leave him here.
Well, I may or may not have made that joke a couple of times. Like, yeah, we got 3, and I don't want to be totally cruel, but, yeah, I'm not living like this. Yes, that's right. We're cold and heartless. What do our listeners think? Listeners, let us know. Are we cold and heartless, or...
Or is this exactly what you would do, but just don't want to admit it?
I know it's a dark topic, but the interesting thing about this is that it was the boy that was haunted and not the house. So that was an interesting twist on the traditional thing. So this movie felt kind of, to me, like I said earlier, like Poltergeist, and a little bit of The Omen, where the kid is the bad guy, but not quite, because he was quite literally the bad guy. And I knew I had it on the tip of my tongue earlier, and just like you did a few minutes ago, now that I'm trying to say it, I can't. So I'm sure that I'll come back to it in probably about 20 minutes or so, because that's what I do. The thing that I was curious about, and let me know if you disagree, the boy was astral projecting, so he was out walking the astral plane, which is neat. It was an interesting story element. Mm-hmm. But the things that were happening in the house were already happening in the house before he went into the coma. So was he bringing that stuff there? Is that what I'm supposed to believe? That it was because he was out doing the thing and he'd just finally gotten that far, that the beings or ghosts or whatever you want to call them in the further were coming back and affecting the home physically? Or was that just a thing that was supposed to make me scared to set me up for earlier?
No, I think the explanation that you can go with is the former. Is that because he was young, he was naive, and he didn't have any fear that when he astral projected, he just thought he was dreaming, and he just used it carelessly. But when Elise came to give the explanation, when he's astral projecting, he leaves behind an empty vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, it's like your soul is out of your body.
Yeah, and she basically said the beings can smell it. So when he's just doing it on a nightly basis, like, quote unquote, he's dreaming, they can smell it, but they're just kind of there, they can't quite jump into his body. Like she said, it takes time and energy. So, yeah, they're affecting the world because they're there, but, there's not much they can do. He's carelessly attracting them. But while they're there, it's like what they're there to do, they're incapable, so they just kind of mess around with the world.
But it's because the farther he goes out, the more they can sense it or smell it, as she said.
Yeah, and the more who show up.
So, had he not ventured out so far, again, in his ignorance, we can't say he was using it carelessly because he didn't know it was a thing he could do.
If he never got lost, the paranormal activity may have been kept to a minimum. In which case, again, if people understood it, like if his parents understood that that's what was going on, then I don't know, maybe they could have lived with that.
Well, if he'd have known that it was a thing that he could do, then maybe he would have been taught how to manage it, how to control it, and not venture so far, because I guess you're in a waking state, or you're aware. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You're aware of what you're doing. So having Elise or whatnot, somebody teach him what this was and what it meant would give him the ability to control it.
Basically. And we wouldn't, if that was the
and
case,
then we wouldn't have a movie. And
we wouldn't have a movie. We wouldn't have problems and turmoil and drama
and we wouldn't have the sequels that were painfully obvious were going to happen, even though I already knew about them beforehand. Yeah,
Chapter 2 is a sequel. Chapter 3 is pretty much a prequel.
Oh, is it the dad's story? Spoilers. Dad can do it too.
Yeah, well, yeah, Chapter 2, continues basically from where we left off.
Okay.
But Chapter 3 is kind of, touching on not so much the dad story. It's in there, but, it's Elisa's story.
Oh, okay.
How she met Specs and Tucker, who, hey, in this movie, I love those two guys. And
they were fun. They had a good rapport. They were a little cliche.
A little bit, but I loved that Tucker, the larger gentleman with the beard, is the same actor as the biotic mechanic from Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of those wow moments when I found out. Again, IMDb. It's like,
yeah.
Who was he? And it's a biotic mechanic. So the guy who, it's like, who was performing the post-mortem abortion, that was him.
Yeah, we don't have a contract with IMDb. It's just the most convenient place to find information about casts and release dates and all that sort of thing.
All kinds of neat trivia and quotes.
Yeah, I did not know, speaking of trivia, that the director of this movie also directed Paranormal Activity and I believe the Saw movies.
Yeah. I don't know if he directed all of the Saw movies, but he is definitely connected. This is the team that I've really started to really like a lot of the movies that they've made, produced or whatever. But yeah, that's this one, The Conjuring, Insidious, Sinister. Another one was Dark Skies, which is a nice little alien one. All pretty much got the same formula. But
right. Well, I mean, there's a reason these things work.
Yeah. So going back to where do we leave off talking about the movie?
Well, we were talking about Tucker and Specs.
Oh yeah. Tucker and Specs. Like I said, I love those two guys. I love the chemistry, especially the relationship they had with Elise. Their intro, especially. I love watching guys who fancy themselves as paranormal investigators and all their neat little equipment and everything, and it's like
we're real serious. I can't believe you normal people don't understand all this.
Yeah, I love the line too. It's like, yeah, we come before Elise to check things out. Really weeds out the whack jobs or whatever he said as he's eating a hot pocket.
Yeah, I laughed at that just because they look like nut jobs in the first place, and the whole thing to normal people is nutty. I liked their technology, particularly the 3D ViewMaster thing that he was using to cycle through the different spectrums. Yeah. That was hilarious. I appreciated the humorous injections. That was a good break.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the scene though when he was convinced that this is for real. When he's going through the ViewMaster spectrums, and he sees the two creepy girls, it just flash a smile. And the way that was done was just, to me, that was artistic.
That was really good, and I think I jumped a little bit at that. That was one of those like gut tightening moments. You're like, ooh, oh, okay, never mind. But one of the things I found myself doing, and maybe it pulled me out of the movie just a little bit, but I know we've talked about the triple before, or things being done in threes. So it's like one thing's safe, the third thing is not. And that I counted a number of those just because that is formulaic, and it works. It gives you that lulled into a false sense of security. But I did notice that they didn't do it quite a number of times. There were a couple of times where I'm like, I was waiting for the 1, 2, 3. I got 1, 2. Oh, hey, good call. Good job on that one. You got me.
I think the scene that we were talking about, though, with the Viewmaster, I think the ghost showed up in the 4th.
Was it the 4th?
I think
that may have been, yeah.
Because I remember...
They may have played that one a little bit longer.
I do think about, the threes. 1, 2, 3, This one I think is
5.
1, 2, 3. Oh, nothing. Oh, 4. Oh, there it is. It's like,
Right. Because something's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too. It's like one of those things,
it's
like you know the gun's going to be loud, but it still scares you. And this
it should.
And
it should.
And this one, it did. It's like, again, I don't know how many times I've seen this movie when those two women show up in the little ghost detector thing, and it still kind of freaks me out. Because, and again, it's to the art direction of this movie, just the way they portrayed the ghosts. It's very unsettling, the way they look. And part of that, and this is just this little bit I got to share, what makes things really scary to me. And I learned this playing the game Silent Hill 2.
Okay.
The creatures that were featured in there were very scary. I mean, you can do the atmosphere. They did the atmosphere, the fog, the dilapidated buildings and everything, the sound. All that sets you up to be scared. But the monsters themselves really were the icing on the cake. Later, when I played Silent Hill 3, same atmosphere, same sound, but the monsters weren't very scary. They were just kind of like beasts that I had to deal with.
Just like any other game, you're like, oh yeah, okay, great, yeah, chainsaw.
Yeah. So the revelation is the thing that Silent Hill 2 had that Silent Hill 3 did not, was that the creatures were vaguely human. They were close enough to being human-like, but being deformed.
So they were the known unknown.
Kinda, yeah, and that's the thing that really frightens us, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Alien, from the Alien franchise, the xenomorph is very detached from being human, in the fact that it doesn't have any eyes, but it's still vaguely human. It walks on 2 legs, it has 2 arms, it grabs you, it has a mouth. Close enough.
That's the eerie thing, is when it's close to us, but not.
Yeah, and again, that's, if you can't have a monster that's too far removed from being human-like if you want it to be scary,
I think that depends on the movie. I mean, if you're doing like a fantasy horror, then it's okay to do something more creature-like, but it usually has to have something that has things that we recognize. Like you were saying, like the Alien and Alien didn't have eyes. If something doesn't have eyes, but you recognize a mouth and maybe something that could be a nose or some sort of facial structure, that makes sense. That's why you don't see a lot of movies like The Blob making it that big, except for, The Blob.
Yeah, The Blob is a classic in its own sense, but I don't think anybody... I mean, aside from me, just the fact that I didn't like the idea of being consumed alive. But other than that, nobody really thinks of the Blob as an incredibly scary creature. At least not in my experience. I shouldn't say nobody, but not in my experience. I've never had anybody talk about it. But, when people talk about the scariest creatures that they know from movies, the one thing they have all in common is there's some vagueness to humanity, something we can relate to. When you have something like the Alien that doesn't have eyes, well, that's a deformity that unsettles us. Because we can't look it in the eye, we can't assume what it's thinking, like other creatures. But
right,
again,
because the eyes are the window to the soul, and you can see theoretically what a being's intent is by the way they're looking at you. If they're narrowed, they're studying you, or eyes wide open, they're scared of you, that sort of thing.
And then with Alien, they're just looking towards you, and that's enough to scare the crap out of you.
Yeah, there's just a facial thing, a mouth looking at you, like, food, got it. I did want to go back real quick to when Elise showed up, or not Elise. No, that's her name, Elise.
Yeah, Elise.
When she showed up, I'm not gonna lie, I was sitting there waiting to open the door and see a little short, heavyset lady with a very high-pitched voice. I was thinking Poltergeist. It was kind of one of those things. And that was, again, another part of the movie that reminded me of Poltergeist. So I could be wrong, but it seems like there was a lot of heavy influence from that.
I don't doubt that. I mean, again, like you said, there's a formula and it works. I don't know, maybe the kindly, smaller statured, older lady, who seems to have all the knowledge on this tends to be a little bit more trustworthy than if we saw me, coming in and say, okay, what you got here is...
Yeah, if it had just been Specs and Tucker, initially, and they were the only ones there, you'd be like, okay, these guys are kooks.
Yeah.
This is going to be one of those things where they're going to try something, it's going to fail, but the family's going to have to figure out what to do in the meantime. But then, the older lady shows up, and she's sort of the stranger but more calm influence, and it kind of gives you that, you're talking what most people would consider nonsense, but you're calm about it. So it's sort of that appeal to emotion. I'm an expert at this because I know this and I've experienced it, and I'm speaking calmly and rationally, just as any scientist would discuss physics or meteorology or geology. It's just a thing. We have yet to understand it, but we continue to study. And this is what's happening in my experience, and some things we just don't fully understand. And it was very calm and soothing like that. There was some neat stuff with like the gas mask and the talking and the link that she and Specs had with the drawing of what she was seeing, because the sound on this movie, there were some parts that were really loud and some parts that were really quiet, and I kept finding myself turning it up to go, what did they just say? I didn't hear what they said. And I kind of felt like that stereotypical guy if my wife had been there like, what did he just say? What did you hear this? Because I didn't hear it.
That's the trap of a lot of horror movies. And a lot of horror games do that too. They start out real quiet and you're like, got to turn the volume up. So when the scare comes, it's nice and loud and scares the crap out of you.
And then it hits you, yeah.
But yeah, and again, talking about the technology, the improvised technology, I should say. Yeah, the gas mask thing was interesting. And yeah, the link to whisper to him, the drawing, and the mother, like, what are you looking at? And she sees that, and it's like, that's what's there, but, we don't see it. That's a very unsettling prospect, that something could be there and you don't see it. That you're sharing your space with something that you're unaware of.
Well, it's like there are bugs in my house, and I know it. I don't like it, but I know they're there.
Yeah, but these are beings that you can't get rid of with a can of Raid.
They're a little more... less understandable. How about that?
Yeah. And, speaking of unsettling, too, two things. One, when they first move, the first ghost she encounters is that little kid. Yeah.
Seemed harmless enough.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. Little kids, man, from Ghost Ship to The Shining to this movie, man, screw kids, man. Ghost kids.
Ghost kids are evil, except Casper. Casper's okay. We like him.
Yeah, I don't trust Casper. But the other thing
Casper was harmless. He was the friendly ghost. He's the friendliest ghost I know.
He's the ghost. He's biding his time. That's all I'm thinking. But the other thing I wanna mention about this movie, and this is the thing Nina hates. She hates the music that they use in this, the Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
I thought that was strangely, creepily appropriate.
I agree. I loved it. To me, that's one of those innocuous songs that some people say a horror movie ruined. But, for me, I was like, nah, awesome. And so she hates it when I play it. So once in a while, just to be a complete dick, I will play that song in the background very faintly until she just slowly raise up the volume until she notices it.
Kids, don't try this at home. Dan is a trained professional at ticking his wife off.
Yes.
This can only be done when one is in a loving and long-term committed relationship.
And now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
Yeah, and the other half is red and blue lasers. Anywho. No lasers in this movie, who knew? The lady that plays I know this is a strange transition, but since we were already in a weird place.
Yeah, we're all over the place on this one.
Yeah, the lady that plays the mother, Barbara Hershey,
Yes.
apparently she is in Once Upon a Time on ABC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we watched the show when it first came out. It was mildly entertaining, and I was like, okay, whatever. If I miss it, I miss it. Who cares? But the girls that were watching the movie with me, they are apparently watching it with their mother or something. I'm not absolutely certain, but they looked at her and said, "Oh, Cora!" Like, I don't know who that is. So she plays the Wicked Queen's mother in Once Upon a Time. I was like, oh, well, you know who she is. I had nothing.
Yeah.
But that goes to what I was going to say is, for the most part, I didn't really recognize anyone in this movie until I went to IMDb and said, oh, that's who that is. Lynn Shay, the lady that plays Elise, she looked really familiar, like I'd seen her in things, and just looking through her IMDb, there were a lot of movies that I've seen. I'm like, oh, okay, yep, that was her. But the kid, Dalton, is the same kid from Iron Man 3 and Jurassic World, and I did not know that.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say, you brought up Barbara Hershey. She's no stranger to the ghost story genre, because she was also the woman who was in the movie The Entity. She played Carla Moran, or Moran, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But yeah, she was in that movie, and that's, I think, I mentioned that in the last cast about horror movies. That's one of my top 3 biggest scare movies for me, was The Entity.
Yeah. Well, this movie scared me. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There were parts that I, quite frankly, wasn't expecting. I thought I had figured out what the next thing that was going to happen was, and a couple of times I was wrong, which is good. That's what I like in a movie, that it surprises me. But the ending, and I know, again, we're jumping all around.
Mm-hmm.
The ending, I was expecting something like that to happen, in that they don't completely close out the story. And that's kind of frustrating, and it's a thing that bothers me about a lot of movies nowadays, is they leave that thing hanging, saying, yeah, there's going to be a sequel. If we win this, if we make our money back, there's going to be a sequel. So just, accept it and move on, when they could have told a nice self-contained story and still had more universe to explore in the sequels.
Yeah, I guess I can kind of agree with you on that. I do have, I don't know if I can call it a pet peeve, but yeah, I do share a little bit of that annoyance when a movie will purposely leave something so obviously open for a sequel. It's, again, it's like, here we're talking about subtlety in the beginning, and now, they end it with something that's just so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I'll stand with you on that.
Yay.
Yay, agreement.
Woohoo.
But, aside from that being really obvious, though, I did like that, it's like, the lady in black, or whatever she was, that she's ever present, and, it did make me want more. Who is this? And, of course, in the sequel, they do go into the explanation as to who and what she is.
Oh, that's good. I'm not going to watch it, but that's good. I'm glad they covered that.
Yeah.
Unless you put it on the list and we end up randomly popping onto that one, but
I don't know if I put the sequels on the list.
No, you didn't.
Oh,
I don't think so. I can check later.
Oh, I can fix that.
I know the guy that puts those on the list, and I would put it on there if you want it. So, but one of the things I did want to do real quick is play for our listeners the clip from the young ladies that watched the movie with me. And again, as I said earlier, we did watch it during the daytime, and they said they're not real big fans of scary movies, in the sense that if we're going to watch this, we have to watch it with the lights on, and it has to be daylight outside. So, there's that. But I'm going to play this, and we can talk about whether we agree or disagree with what they had to say. And remember, they're 11 and 13, so let's not be too mean. So, Allie, what did you think of the movie Insidious?
It was kind of anticlimactic for me. It was slow getting to the point until there was a few jump scares here and there. but overall I thought it was a little slow and boring.
Okay. What did you feel was anticlimactic?
Just like them talking for a while and just like some things popping up over like a long period of time. It wasn't that interesting or exciting.
So it was just kind of a slow movie until there were flurries of activity, and then it was slow again.
And then there was the end.
The end. Okay. Avery, what did you think of the movie?
I personally liked the movie. It wasn't the scariest movie I've ever seen, but it was an interesting movie. It took a while to get going, but once it did, it was good.
Were you scared?
I was like, there's some parts where I was like, oh my god, that was really scary. But then there were
I did
other
see
parts,
you jump once or twice.
Yeah, but there are other parts that I was kind of like, come on, like I knew every horror movie has that plot twist. Like,
okay. So when you say plot twist, what are you talking about?
I liked the plot twist where the dad was a traveler as well as the son, which is why he was such an active traveler. But most horror movies, the parents have something to do with it, and it gets all, well, I knew this, but I didn't want to tell you, type thing. Like, the mother didn't want to tell.
So you thought it was kind of an easy out?
Yeah.
Okay. Allie, were there any parts that scared you?
Maybe the part where she jumped on top of me because she was scared.
So there was nothing in the movie that made you jump yourself?
Not really. I mean, coming into the room after going into the kitchen with Avery screaming was a little scary.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to say about the movie?
I personally liked it.
It was okay.
All right, so that was Avery and Allie, some friends of my daughter's who sat and watched the movie with me. And Dan, how did you feel about their comments?
Well, initially, when she said she wasn't impressed by this movie, I'm just like, what? It's just, but, okay, she's 11. I don't know if I can say it's the cynicism of the generation, but, all right, well, she did watch it during during with the lights on. Boring. Okay. That
Oh,
said,
sure, now you're going to pick on 11-year-olds. All right, Dan's the bad guy here because...
Well, if you're going to watch a horror movie, you got to watch it right, but they're kids, I don't expect them, But she did touch on an interesting point, though, when she talked about jump scares. And I know that is a lot of criticism, and a lot of it well-founded, about the overuse of jump scares. This movie had a few of them. Personally, I don't think that they were overused in this one. I think that the ones that they did have were placed appropriately. The ones that I can think of just right off the top of my head, like, again, when the little child ghost, when they move into the new house, he jumps out of the cupboard. That one seemed appropriate to me. The face behind the father that Barbara Hershey's, his mother saw.
Oh,
that
yeah.
one, that's a classic one.
That one got me. Not gonna lie. That, in fact, that was the jump scare that Allie got scared at because Avery jumped onto her. They were sitting right next to each other on the couch, and that was the, like, oh, got you on that one. Like, that's okay, got me too. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah,
and then like I said, when Tucker changed the spectrum and saw the two girls in the hallway, and it really wasn't much of a jump scare. Again, it was like an unsettling thing, but yeah, there they are, and then they smile. Not just a smile like you or I. It was almost like a cut frame.
Like,
it's
picture.
Yeah.
And
that again, the vaguely human, the inhuman movements. I guess you consider that a jump scare, and to me, that was effective and well placed.
Yeah, the skittering, if you will, that sort of thing. Now, Allie thought it was kind of anticlimactic. I'm going to disagree with our young listener. I think there was a hectic climax. What I think was the climax was not satisfactory. There were two things about the ending that bothered me, and I think I'd mentioned one. I was hoping that they would close out the story, but you get that whole continuation thing. I was expecting that somebody was getting possessed, and that was going to have some sort of follow-on action, like when the dad's body kills Elise. So that was interesting, but I expected her to die. She died a little later than I thought she was going to, but I expected her to die. The one thing that I was really dissatisfied with was we never found out what happened to Dalton's demon. I don't know that they ever wrapped that up. I don't know if they do it in the sequel.
Yeah, if memory serves, he doesn't return in the sequel. He just sort of disappears. They ran from him, and that was it.
Yeah, so that was it. That was kind of sad because you really didn't get any resolution to that. I guess it leaves it open for an Insidious 4, maybe when he's the dad or something. But it just felt a little less than satisfactory. Like I just watched a reasonably decent, scary movie, and I did not get Jason Voorhees' mother's head getting chopped off at the end of it. I did not handle what I thought was the main bad guy. I got some other side threat that was foreshadowed in the opening credits and briefly spoken of at points during the movie, but it was never a thing that I thought was going to be an issue. And then in the end, when it was, you're like, oh, well, that's great. You can do that. But what about the other thing? I mean, I think from if I were going to fix this standpoint, I would have had a piece of the movie where the demon with the red face, Dalton's demon, whatever we want to call him, was either subtly killed, I guess, or banished by the old lady, which I guess would have given away that it was the dad that was going to be possessed, or it would have been something that after the dad was possessed, you flash to the red-faced demon cowering from her in the astral world or something like that. If there'd have been some closure on that, I would have been much more satisfied with the movie. That was the biggest thing.
Okay, that's fair.
And then the other thing is everything was so frenetic that when you got to the end, it was like, oh, that's it? You're just there? And then the other stuff happened. So I kind of get it, but what you thought was the ending was like all action, all action, all action. Oh, now something's happening. So, it was a little, like I said earlier, less than satisfactory.
Okay. My question, it's like, she called it anticlimactic. I'm just wondering, I'm curious, is it just what she would consider climactic?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to pursue that later. I'll ask.
Yeah, I'm wondering what she would have wanted.
We're recording well past their bedtime, and it's a school night, so, they went home.
But, like I said, I personally was satisfied, generally. Like I said, aside from the, again, the obvious that it's going to be a sequel type thing. But, I mean, I liked it. It was an oh shit moment when Elise took the picture. And, it's like, oh, what did she see? What did she see? And then the wife comes in and sees the picture that it's the lady in black.
Yeah, that was neat.
Yeah, that was neat. But, I mean, again, that whole thing where you're talking about the frenetic thing where he's in the further and, he's looking in houses and seeing all these spirits in their various forms of torment. I love that. It affected me so much that they had God, this was years ago. We went to Halloween Horror Nights and they had an Insidious maze. And there was a part of the maze that they made. Again, this is Universal Studios. This is their bread and butter. Production values are through the roof. Mm-hmm. They recreated the dining room where it was just a bunch of people sitting around the table, but they were like faceless people.
Oh, cool.
And, you walk into there and it's like black except for the characters and everything. And like one of them's going to get up and scare you.
Of course.
Some of them are mannequins and the other ones are real people that are going to get it. And yeah, that movie affected me so much. I stepped in that room, I said nope, and ran out. And left all my friends, including my then girlfriend Nina, behind. She came out of that maze so pissed at me. She was like, you left me in there!
Well, it's all fake, right? I mean...
Yeah, but
No, that's what you're telling her. Like it's all fake. I just I had an appointment. I had to pee.
I just said it's like I took one step in that room. I'm like nope, and out I went.
No, I have lines, and you have crossed them.
But that's how effective that movie was. That's the artistic expression from that movie was just so effective in unsettling me.
There were some neat little artistic flourishes that I really cared for, and we'll go back to the opening credits when the names would pop on of the actors, and then they would just sort of wisp away in smoke. That was kind of neat, the way they became secondary letters and then just sort of wisped off. The foreshadowing, if you will, in the credits was kind of cool because I was not expecting the little boy that was in the bed to be the dad as opposed to, the kid that was in the coma. So that was neat. One of the things that confused me a little bit was when the dad was in the further and he was going to look for his son, and he stops and there's a little boy that he asks directions of. Was that him? Was that him as a child? Like an echo of him or something? Again, they didn't really explain the further, and they could have said anything that would have made me fine with it, but I was expecting that to be tormented dead people going through their torments, and yet here's this kid who is, I think, supposed to be the dad as a child.
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that one.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. I never thought about it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, listeners, you're on the job.
Yes, listeners, please let us know. And when Avery and Allie and I were watching this movie, we all sort of asked the same thing. Like, was that him when he was a kid? Is that who that is? So,
yeah.
So we've talked about what Allie thought. Let's talk about what Avery thought. She was pretty much the target of this movie. She got scared at the appropriate points. She even said it. She liked it for a scary movie. She didn't think it was the scariest movie she'd ever seen. So, is this the scariest movie you've ever seen? I think you'd already answered that, but just to revisit the issue, or the question, rather.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the absolute scariest, but it's definitely up there.
Well, if you had a visceral reaction at a Universal Studios tour, I would say that it was pretty far up there. That's a good indicator.
Yeah, because, I walked through the same event, Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. I walked through the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, and there was a few parts I looked in there, and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And I hung out and looked at it in admiration. So, yeah, not the same reaction. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a scary movie, but yeah, I walk in that house, and I'm like, whoa, this stuff's pretty cool. I walk into the Insidious house, and I'm like, nope, and out I go.
Yep, not going here.
So I'm going to say that The Conjuring kind of eked it out a little bit.
Okay. That's the same guy, though, right? Same director.
Yeah, same producers. I don't know if it's the same director, but definitely the same producers.
Okay.
But, Poltergeist still has some energy to it. And only for certain scenes that kind of get me going.
Okay. I was going to say, and I forgot to mention this during our last episode, one of the scary movies that I do actually own, I haven't watched it in probably a good 15 years, maybe more, is Mimic, if you're familiar with that movie.
Oh, yeah. Didn't we see that together in theaters?
I think we did. I think that scared the crap out of me, but I still own it.
The bugs that look like people, or that can look like people, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the scariest movies that I've ever seen because it is, one, I don't like bugs, and two, it takes something that's reasonably easy to deal with. It's a bug, okay, get the flamethrower and we're fine. But then you've got these great big giant human-looking bugs, and that just quite frankly scared the bejeebers out of me. This movie, like I said, there were some spots that made me jump, but I wouldn't say it was the scariest movie I'd ever seen either.
Well, maybe one day if The Conjuring shows up on the random.
I hope our listeners can hear my eyes fluttering and rolling like, God, please no. But that's okay. Dan had to watch a Goofy movie, and I'm sure he's going to end up watching some movies. He's like, what the hell is this? Why do you own this? Like, I have kids, and they watched it.
Was it the Scooby one?
Yeah. Or I like the movie a lot, and you're just going to have to suffer through it. And I'm pretty sure there's a couple of movies on that list that are mine that I just have because I love them for nostalgic reasons, or they go so far around the this is bad that they're actually good again. Kind of like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. That's good schlock horror. So I did have one question. What I want to know is, what lawyer is the dad gonna hire for his murder case? He flat out murders Elise. No ifs, ands, or buts. His handprints, his hands, dead. D-E-A-D. Probably got fingerprints all over the place. There were only 5 people in the house. 6 if you count the kid, but 4 of them were all together. And then you got 2 people. They were together. 1 ends up dead. I mean, maybe it's circumstantial, but I'm pretty sure they could take hand measurements and figure out it was him. How do you defend against that? What's your lawyerly defense?
Never thought about that. It's just one of those movies you just kind of accept it as it goes.
No, I don't have to, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't like horror movies. So I had to occupy my mind with things that were not like, oh, that was creepy. Oh, okay, that scared me. And then I had to ask these silly questions like, how's he going to get a defense attorney for this? This is pretty cut and dry.
Oh, one that
her.
may try to use an insanity plea or something.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, maybe you could take the photo as evidence. Like, look, this was, the last thing she saw. Maybe. While she was dying, look at the timestamp, look at the time of death. Couldn't possibly have done this. It's some crazy old lady broke into my house and ran away.
Yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to find a lawyer, that would take that case. But, hey, if I ever become a lawyer, I'd take it. Because, I'd be like Zedmore from Ghostbusters, man. It's like, this stuff's real. I've seen shit that will turn you white.
I'm just saying, maybe go on Craigslist. Need a good lawyer.
Paranormal lawyer, yeah.
Okay, so other things that I had questions about. It's sort of the beginning when they're talking about them moving in, and the dad looks at the wife, Renee, I think is her name. He looks at her and says, Renee, I don't want this to be like it was before. But they never go into like it was before. So do they ever discuss why they moved to the first house in the first place?
I don't remember. I'd have to watch the sequel again. I know that there was a lot explored, again, from his childhood, because, again, he was also a traveler, astral projectionist, if the word is correct.
By the way, Barbara Hershey's character is a bad mom. Just throwing that out there.
So there's a lot of that that he had to deal with. So there is a possibility that caused a lot of mental issues. I don't think they really explored too much into that. Like I said, the second movie really more explored into who the lady in white was and why she was such an evil person and why she caused so much torment.
Yeah.
Did I say the lady in white? I meant the lady in black.
Oh, yeah, you did say the lady in white, and cool.
Just real quick, there was a great scene in the sequel, which we were talking about earlier. Hey, we got to leave this house. Okay, let's leave. Hey, wow, they did something right.
Yay!
There's a scene where the two guys, Specs and Tucker, walk into a room and they see a ghost boy and saying, you guys got to leave or else she'll kill you. And so their reaction is like, okay. And they walk right out. And I thought that was just such a precious moment. I was like, wow, these ghost people are smart.
That's a word.
It's like they're like Shaggy and Scooby.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, let's get out.
Like, we got to go. And I think the last question that I had was based on the statement that I made earlier about Barbara Hershey's character being a bad mother. Who does that? Who figures out a way to repress their kid's memory and never tells them about something, and then sees something very similar happen in his life and waits 4 months to say something?
Other than a bad mom,
mothers. That's who.
Well, I mean, you could say it's a bad mom, but I'm going to play devil's advocate on this and say that she was also a very scared mother. And when you're scared, you don't necessarily think rationally. Having the past experience with her son, you can only imagine it's very similar to the experience that the mother is now having with Dalton, and it's very scary. So reliving that fear might freeze you.
Well, in her defense, she did say in the movie, I was hoping that wasn't what this was.
There you go. I guess that kind of supports what I'm saying. She was scared.
I kind of get that, but I get that for, maybe a week or two, but 3-4 months, kind of thinking maybe it's time to crap or get off the pot, lady.
Well, at that point, then you're probably looking at denial.
Or you're looking at well, crap, he's going to hate me if I tell him now. Like, well, the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. What happens if your grandson is actually possessed by Darth Maul? Which brings me to my next point. We laughed and said, oh, hey, look, Darth Maul's the bad guy. Awesome.
It's his illegitimate brother.
Yes, from the astral plane. So we weren't the only ones that thought that, were we?
No, we thought a vague resemblance in big fuzzy Ugg boots.
Yes, which is why we couldn't really take him seriously.
Yeah, the character design on that was if you saw him in the light, you'd think he was silly, but they cleverly put him in the darkness for the most part. It made him just scary enough.
Yeah, and I like how for the most part you could tell when something was from the further. It had that sort of blue tint to the screen, that bluish gray green.
Yes.
That helped a lot.
Here's something that I just kind of want to bring up too and everything. It kind of goes back to the scene where Tucker is going through with the Viewmaster and, he's looking at the different spectrums looking for ghosts and he finds a couple and it freaks him out and he backs out and everything. He's obviously very shaken by it Because it's probably, as much as they do this ghost hunting thing, I mean, it kind of indicates that he's not used to finding an actual ghost.
Right. It's usually sort of like the Harry Houdini thing where you're actually going to debunk as opposed to expecting to see something there.
You know, very, very reminiscent, too, of the movie 1408. I don't know if you ever saw that one with John Cusack.
I know of it, haven't seen it.
Okay, pretty good movie. I don't know if you can call it a ghost movie because, again, there's a great scene where, you know, where he's speaking with Samuel L. Jackson, who is playing the hotel manager who is resisting his desire to spend the night in that room. And finally, John Cusack wears him down and says, okay, you're going to go in that room and everything. And John Cusack's character says something about a specter, and Samuel L. Jackson's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I never said anything about a specter. It's just an evil effing room. Love that line. So yeah, I don't know if you can call that movie a true ghost story type movie. But John Cusack, again, he plays a character who looks for ghosts. He goes to all these places that advertise being haunted, never seen a ghost. So obviously when he's in room 1408, he's very shaken because this is the first actual paranormal activity that he's seen. Cut back to Tucker. You know, these guys are paranormal investigators. I'm sure they've investigated maybe up to hundreds of houses. Found nothing. The fact that he's unsettled by this, by seeing what he saw, you know, lends to that he's unsure of what he's seen.
Yeah, I can always feel that in myself, like you were saying. You know, I'm sure 99 times out of 100, there's nothing there, and then maybe this is the worst one they've ever seen, because they obviously weren't there when Elise was working with the dad, because they're far too young for that, so...
Yeah, so here comes my thing, and this is kind of a personal thing. You know, we've watched the movie and everything, we've seen everybody's reactions. How would you feel if you had something that could show you if a spirit or something like that? I mean, let's just assume they're real or whatever. You know, but I mean, if you had a device that could show you that, hey, in your house, there's one right now, would you want to know? Or is ignorance bliss?
I'm going to go with the ignorance bliss thing, because right now, nothing has flown off of my shelf. There's nothing that has happened that would be out of the norm that you couldn't easily dismiss as, oh, I must have meant to put my phone in the refrigerator. So I would prefer not to know, because then I would start looking for things that could have happened and probably drive myself insane. And I'm telling you right now, that's not a long trip.
Well, I'm gonna tell you just my own personal thing to go along with it that's appropriate for this cast here is that nothing really serious has happened to me, you know, as far as experiencing paranormal. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like I'd love to experience it, but I've never experienced it. But there was a short time in the apartment that I'm living in now where my iPhone video was picking up orbs. You know, people have an explanation. It's dust. It's something wrong with the light gathering element on the phone or whatever. But you know what? For just a short period of time is when the phone was picking them up. I do it now. Nothing. I go anywhere else. Nothing. I go to somebody else's house. Nothing. You know, so why only then? And that's the thing, because now, whenever I think about it, and I'm thinking, let's do it again and see if I see any, I'm hesitant. Because, like, do I really want to know? Do I really want, you know, because what if it escalates? You know, it's like...
What if they're back? Crap.
And that's the thing, you know, it's like this movie really kind of makes me think that. It's like, if I had the ability to find them, do I want to?
Yeah, no, not at all. Not even remotely.
Yeah.
So, to change subjects just a little bit, the dad has this ability. The force is strong in his family, and he passes that on to his son. But he had an experience when he was younger, and through some machination and, you know, some plot element, they say they, you know, suppressed the memories or not. But just because you suppress the memories doesn't mean you lose the ability, because even when he was having his dream in the classroom, I don't know if he was having a dream of the memory or if he was just walking back in time astrally, then it didn't really explain that. So what I want to know is, for the last, let's say, 25 years, assuming he's 30, 35, I guess, you know, having a kid that's probably about 11, you know, let's say he and his wife got married at 24, or, you know, had a kid at 24. That's probably about right, you think?
Yeah, okay.
So let's say for 25 years, he's been out wandering the astral plane with nothing. Or did he lose that because he couldn't remember doing it in the first place? That part kind of didn't make sense to me.
Well, I think the dreams he was having in the classroom is just the images he had or that got imprinted in his brain or whatever's the neural net connections
Sure.
when he was astral traveling. Doesn't necessarily means he understood where he got those images or how he got them or anything.
Right, I'm with you there.
So, the scene in the classroom, like I said, when he's having those dreams, it's just the images that he has in his head, and he doesn't understand why he has them. And that's why he's disturbed by them. I'm assuming you're asking, is like, how come he doesn't astral travel anymore?
Yeah, how come he had that 25-year break?
To me, it's the same as, they say once you learn to ride a bike, you never forget. But if by some way somebody puts it in your head that you can't ride a bike, so for all those years you don't ride a bike because you've been told you can't.
Okay. I guess I could buy that, and I suppose if you had a strong enough psychic, imprint that you couldn't do it, yeah.
Yeah, because in the movie, essentially, to use my analogy, they came back and said, hey, you know what? You can ride a bike.
And then the memory walls came crumbling down.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, no, I can't. But see, you still have that muscle memory, even though you consciously don't believe that you do. You get on that bike and you start pedaling, and you realize, like, whoa, hey, look, what the hell am I doing? I'm riding this thing. That's my explanation.
Yeah, I just found that part a little...
contrived?
Yes, that is the perfect word for it.
And I understand where that comes from, but like I said, it's like with movies like this, you come up with your own explanation, suspension of disbelief. It worked for me.
Okay, well, it didn't work for me. So there. That's really, I think, everything that I had to say about the movie. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss?
Let's see. No, I think we pretty much covered it.
There was one little piece of trivia that I did catch, and I kind of wanted to make sure that I pointed it out, was in the classroom, and since we were just talking about it, when he falls asleep grading the papers or whatnot, and he's, but on the blackboard was the director's name, and I think one of the producers, and then there was the Saw
Billy.
Puppet from,
Billy the
sure.
Puppet
I
from
don't know
Saw.
the name, but...
Yeah, that's a nice little Easter egg.
Yeah, that was interesting. The girls actually noticed it first, because when the movie opens and you go through the credits and there's the white orb and it's got his name in it, and then it rotates and it's an overhead light, which was neat. There's like, oh, James Wan, okay, cool. And then I guess they knew about Saw. I don't know if they'd seen it or whatnot. I didn't ask. They're like, oh, hey, that's that face from that movie. I'm like, that's from Saw, right? And they're like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, okay, cool, sure. Well, I mean, we've talked about the movie, kind of wrapped up our final thoughts. All right, let's find out where the girls would put this movie on their shelves, and then we'll move on to us. And here we go. If you had to give it a ranking, let's say you had a shelf full of movies, and you could put it on the top shelf, meaning that's where you keep your best movies, or the bottom shelf, meaning that's where you keep your poopiest movies, but you just happen to own them. What shelf would you put that on?
I would put it right around the middle.
Right around the middle? Okay. Allie, how about you?
Maybe second to last.
Second to the last shelf? Out of how many shelves? Let's say 5. Would you still say that? 6 shelves?
Yeah.
So it would be on the 4th shelf?
Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies, thank you very much for watching the movie with me, and thank you very much for letting me record your thoughts and include it in my podcast.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, because this is not going to go on my shelf, and I rented this from Amazon for a few bucks, I'm going to tell you, if I owned it, it would probably go in general population. I have to agree with Avery and Allie. It would be general population. Probably a movie I would not watch again unless somebody else said, oh, hey, let's watch a scary movie. Like, well, I have 2. Which one do you want to watch? But it was a decently made movie. There were some things, like I said, throughout this discussion that I didn't care for. So, yeah, I would probably put it, on the middle shelf. I think there are better scary movies out there. But it was serviceable. Like I said, it made me jump. That's actually what's keeping it, in general population instead of probably a little bit farther down.
Well, for me, I thought this was, as far as scary movies go, I thought this was pretty well made. Didn't rely on a whole lot of gore or glitz.
Yeah, I think only one person died, and I like that.
And, it's like, it wasn't a very gory death either. It was just strangulation.
Straight up choking him there.
Yeah, the imagery, the artistic design, So I'd say that within a certain section of my collection where it's just a large group of standout movies, honorable mentions, I guess, if you want to say, and in that population is where it goes.
Okay.
And like I said, a lot of the scary movies that James Wan and associated producers and everything made, like I said, Conjuring, Insidious, Sinister, Dark Skies, all those share the same shelf. I guess you can call it standouts. I don't know if we've ever talked about a movie that had a spot on that space. So I think this is the first one we actually mentioned.
Okay, cool.
And I bought it in Blu-ray. It came with a lot of good special features. So not quite general population, but definitely a special section unto itself.
Cool. Now that we've discussed where it goes on our shelf, we do have some listener feedback from our genres episode, and it is from Jeff S. It says, "You guys just keep getting better. 2 weeks is too long between episodes." Well, I will say in response to that, and I haven't replied on the comments section, and I apologize for that, but 2 weeks is just long enough with trying to work out schedules and the working hours, the working hour difference, working days and working nights and random schedules and that sort of thing. So we will try to make sure that we're doing everything on schedule, and so far we've been pretty good about it, and we might in the future have something else to add, which will give you a little more content. So thanks for that, and we appreciate you listening. And as we appreciate all of our listeners. All, like, 7 of you.
Now, didn't we pass 200 downloads just recently?
We did recently pass 200 downloads. We are at 207 currently, so...
Nice.
That's good
stuff.
stuff.
And in how many countries?
14, I think. Yep.
14 countries. I never thought that it would be that.
Well, see? That's what we do. We surprise people. Yeah, we have, the only continent we're missing, or continents, are Australia. Well, okay, so we're missing basically everything south of the equator. South America, Australia, Antarctica, and we don't have any in Africa that I know of. Maybe somebody will go to Africa and download just so we can get that.
There you go.
I have some friends making a trip to South America next year, so maybe they can hit that up while they're down there. And they'll be down near Antarctica. Maybe somebody put up a cell tower down there.
I got a friend who his job requires him to go to Antarctica every now and again. Maybe I'll have him download a podcast when he goes on his next expedition.
That would be awesome. Talk to your friend. Has to happen.
Yeah. Yes. I'll see if I can make that happen.
All right. So I will implore our listeners to share with your friends those things that you enjoy, like us, talking about movies. And you can do that by sharing out our Facebook page. You can give people our email address, WRIOS2016mr@gmail.com. You can share the Podbean page. You can share links to Google Play and iTunes. And I believe that Podbean pushes that out to other podcast aggregator sites as well. So just give us a Google. We're on the Google box. And you can send other people our way so we can get more listener feedback and we can get better at what we're doing. So we're glad you like what we're doing, and we just hope to keep making it better. Dan, you got anything to add to that?
Nothing but a tiptoe through the tulips in the garden by the window.
So Dan got to sing on this one. Yay. All right, our next movie is...
The Heat.
Is that the one with Sandra Bullock? Or the one with Robert De Niro?
Good question. Heat is the one with Robert De Niro. The Heat is, I think that's the Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy one. Yeah, I think I own this because Christy bought it, so haven't watched it.
I'll get to watch it again with Nina.
All right, well, that'll be fun. See? Reasons to rewatch movies.
Yep.
Because the podcast makes us. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and
Okay.
Dan, do you want to consider your singing your special goodbye?
Yes, we'll do the tiptoe through the tulips in the garden by the window.
All right, and thanks everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks with The Heat.